What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Coffee and Chatting About Guitar Stuff. Today, we're going to talk about market placement of products. This is a big one for our community. It's a big source of contention because I think a lot of people don't understand how a company, nobody ever thinks from the company side of it. We only think from the consumer side. And what I think people don't realize and they don't give credit for is that the company's actually looking at the consumer when they make these decisions. And I think we should talk about this. So, for example, people have a tendency to assume, for example, that I get annoyed by cheap guitars, or that I don't want them, or that I don't want people with cheap guitars to buy my products, or whatever. None of that's true. None of that's true. What I think is bad for the community is when somebody compares a $300 guitar to a $2,500 guitar and acts like one company's trying to rip you off and the other company has this amazing deal that is just as good as this other one. Those two products were never designed to compete in the first place, and that comparison and the community that rises up around those comparisons, I call them the just as good as guys, is, I believe, that part of the community that's bad for the community. That is what alienates one guitar player from another. That is what will ultimately make a beginner guitar player not want to play because he's just confused, and there's toxicity in the community, etc. So I wanted to dive into, like I said, those guitars were never meant to compete. Okay. Because here's the thing. Most guitar companies are not going to ask the question. This is not how a guitar company works. They do not say, what's the cheapest guitar we can build? And how can we put the most features on the cheapest guitar? That's not what they're doing. They're setting up their brand to appeal to different buyers. So you're going to have the custom shop buyer. You're going to have the limited edition production buyer. You're going to have the top tier production buyer. You're going to have the high end import buyer. You're going to have the kind of mid-level import buyer. And then you're going to have, which mid-level import is going to be like a classic vibe, for example. And then you're going to have your entry-level guitars. They want to know the answer to the questions like, who is buying the guitar? We're going to design a guitar for that buyer. They know by doing market research and stuff what the average spend is. They know all that stuff. What features matter to not only make the guitar a good value, but also where it sits in their range so that it becomes part of, because they're trying to draw somebody into a community. They're trying to draw somebody into, they're trying to make a Fender guy. They're trying to make a Gibson guy. They're trying to make it, right? What experience are they expecting? And a lot of that has to kind of go outside of the guitar itself. A lot of that could be, whatever teaching apps and that kind of stuff. Now, these days, that's what people do. And so the danger comes in where the consumer looks at that and says, well, this guitar only costs X amount of dollars to build, so why does it cost so much? And there's a lot more to it than that. Price also reflects so many other things about a guitar, obviously. Dealer network, customer expectations, marketing, obviously the materials, finish quality, labor time, the amount of features that are on a guitar directly affect the manufacturer, time, production volume, how you're going to, like how many you're going to make, because the more you make, that changes the economy of scale. The less you make, the more expensive the guitar has to be. It's just the way it is. Two guitars can cost very similar in their like actual pile of parts, but still be marketed to two completely different audiences and priced for two completely different audiences based on other things surrounding the guitar, not the materials itself. Okay. And so this is something that it's really hard for guitar players. I don't know why, because we don't really do this in any other area of life. But for guitar players, some people they just get stuck in this like, well, it should only cost $400. That's always the number. And where the negativity comes into it and where the problem comes in is not the instrument itself at any price point. It's when somebody says this Harley Benton is just as good as this Gibson, this Epiphone just like totally destroys this Gibson. All my Epiphones are better than my Gibsons. Okay, sure. You know, the whole budget beats expensive thing. Maybe for your needs, it's possible. I believe you. If you say that you have an Epiphone and you like it better than your Gibson, I believe you 100%. I have no problem with that. But that's you. And you are one person among hundreds of millions of people. The intended customer for the guitar, you might have found a way to enjoy that guitar even though you weren't the intended customer for it. But that is not the way the guitar was designed, and that is not the average customer. Guitar players tend to have this thing that since they want a certain thing, everybody wants that thing. I don't know why that is, but it's just the way it is. It just seems to be the way it is. The intended customer is probably totally different. Most products are built into tiers for a reason. It's not some sort of grand conspiracy. It's basically so that I think Gibson does it really well. I think Fender doesn't do it as well because Fender has too many models. I think Fender doesn't need as many models as they have. And they parse it up too much. Okay. But I think if you have a $300 guitar, you have a $500 to $800 guitar, then you have an $800 to $1,500 guitar, then you have a $15 to $25 or $3,000 guitar. The windows will get bigger, and then you kind of have into the custom shop stuff. Those are not meant to be compared with each other. They're meant to be sold to different customers based on different customers' needs. Where the trick gets into it is where people's egos say, I should deserve a Gibson because. But you're actually an Epiphone guy, which is totally fine because they're amazing. If you're a Harley Benton guy because you're a Harley Benton guy because you only are willing to spend or are able to spend, you make that decision based on whatever to only spend $500 for a guitar or $300 for a guitar, then you're a Harley Benton guy. There was never any intention, desire, or design to compare that to a $2,500 Gibson. It just wasn't. It was never meant to happen. And that is where the culture takes a wrong turn, is when people do that. Companies, they intentionally will like leave room for leveling up, if you will. Yesterday we went and bought Brianna she bought it. I'm helping her buy it. Volkswagen Tiguan, and she had a Taos before, and this one level up, right? It's like not even that much more expensive, just one level up. But there are intentional things left out on the cheapest car, right? There's I don't know, the Apple CarPlay is better in the new one. The of course the upholstery is nicer. You know what I mean? Like there's just more features in it, even on the base model, because you got the base model. And nobody says, well, this car is just as good as this one. Oh, it went from a 1.5 liter to a 2 liter turbo. The wheels are a little nicer. The car's nicer. It's quieter inside. There's just more stuff. It's not that much more expensive, actually. I don't even know that it was $5,000 more. But those features were there intentionally to kind of level her up. Guitars do the same thing. A lot of products. You out of here? I love you. Have fun. A lot of products have that, right? A lot of products have these levels. They're not meant to be compared to each other. Now, what you might do is you might say, all right, this has this many features and this has many features, this many features, and we had to make this decision yesterday. Is it worth it for her to spend this much more money to get all of this stuff? It came down to interest rate, really, but for us, but that's what you make those decisions, right? So you're not being manipulated. It's part of product lines. It's part of being part of that community. It's part of the aspirational goal of playing guitar, that you start out with something that you can afford, and someday I'm going to have a custom shop guitar. Someday I'm going to have whatever. It happens in every other area of life, and we don't even think about it. Now, let's go to opposite extremes. So Brianna had a Volkswagen Taos. I have an Audi Q7. You wouldn't compare those guitars or those cars because we're different customers, because we are in different places in life, because we have different needs. I need more room. I need a bigger car. I need, third row seat, etc. All that stuff. Like there's various things in the same hobby. There's different cameras, there's different watches, there's different everything for that reason. Nobody ever, outside of understanding features, like you buy this EOS R6 Canon or you buy an R5 Canon, which is actually a higher model. Do you need that stuff? No, I don't really need that stuff. Okay, cool. Well, then you just buy the one that has the features that you need. Sometimes you'll buy one model up. I did that with a 3D printer. I bought one model up from the 3D printer that I was going to get because I think I might grow into it, right? And guitar players don't think like that for some reason. If you're going to do this for a while, buy a nice guitar. You probably grow into it. You'll probably enjoy it, right? So the idea here is that there's nothing wrong with any of the guitars. They're all marketed to different people. The problem is stop asking if it's worth it. Stop asking if this one is just as good as this other one. If you start to ask the question, who is this guitar intended for? Then all those arguments go away. You're nicer to your other guitar friends. You're nicer in the guitar community. That guitar's not for me. I like this one, but I'd love to share. And I want to see your inexpensive guitar. I want to play it. I just want to know. And people will say, okay, but the problem is that if I'm going to spend $500, I want to get the best deal that I can get. Okay, well then compare it to other $500 guitars. There's no reason to compare a Harley Benton to a Gibson because they're not meant to be compared. They're not in the same market. They're not in the same league, and it's just not as good as a Gibson. Okay, we could get into all the technical stuff about that. Decide what your intended product is. Decide where you are in the market, where you are right now, or where you want to be. Like if you're going to buy something, maybe one level up because you're kind of thinking about, expanding or whatever, room for growth, because we all want to be growing. That's cool. and compare within that. So here's all the $500 guitars. Which one gives me the best value, right? Because at that point, you're talking about value. And this is the other thing. Depending on who the guitar is intended for, it's less or more about financial value and more about the other non-tangibles. At the lower end of the market, it's going to be more about financial value. Makes sense, right? Because you're getting into the hobby, you have limited funds, you're doing everything you can do. So you buy a Harley Benton or a Firefly or whatever, which is excellent. That's great. You buy whatever guitar you need because you're in that budget, you're in that whatever, right? And that's awesome. And you're going to try to find the best value. You're going to get the best for the money, right? But the more you enjoy the hobby, the more you understand the non-tangible things about this thing and the history and the finer nuances. Skill brings familiarity, and skill and experience in a hobby will bring you, if you are into it, and if you're an open-minded person, will bring you more appreciation of finer points of things that right at the beginning of the hobby you may have never experienced or may have never appreciated, right? It just kind of happens. It's just like, some people just eat food and other people are real connoisseurs of food. Some people drink wine. They don't understand it. I don't really understand wine, but I do understand bourbon, right? So, for example, the more you get into something, the more you're going to appreciate it. The less the financial value becomes a problem or a consideration, and more those other non-tangible things. So that is part of what makes you a different customer. Is if you're value driven, like dollars value driven, then the places you hear. If you are driven by the art and the other things that drive you that are not financial, then it puts you here. Now, it does cost money to get there. That's a whole nother conversation, but that's what it is. You are a different customer, which is great. And we want all the customers. We want all the guitar players to buy guitars. We want all the pickup buyers to buy pickups. We want everybody to buy. We want everybody to have what they want. What we don't want is the toxicity that comes from the community comparing stuff that's not meant to be compared. So if you're shopping in the entry-level area, compare entry-level guitars. If you're shopping in the classic vibe area, compare those guitars. If you're buying a Mexican Strat, you could probably compare it with a classic vibe for the sake of what feature does it come with. This one comes with noiseless pickups. I don't really want that, so I'll just save the money and I'll buy a classic vibe, for example. The just as good as guys that's just so pointless. It's so pointless. And what you're doing is you're robbing yourself of the joy of experiencing as much as you can experience when you play guitar. The people that say, and this is another thing that bugs me, okay? I have expensive guitars, and I like cheap guitars too. But for some reason, that doesn't go the other direction a lot of times. The folks that are the just as good as people who are constantly comparing will say bad things about a Gibson custom shop and then all of a sudden cut that entire side of the culture off from their view. So they'll get in this little echo chamber of Harley Benton group or whatever, Firefly group or whatever group, and they'll just be like, we have the best stuff and our stuff is just as good as whatever. And it's nothing having to do with the guitar. The guitar's probably fine. It's the community that results from the comparison that is the problem. If you're not that person, you're awesome. If you have one of those guitars and you're not that person, you're awesome. That's great. I love that. But just don't be that guy. Just don't be that guy. That's the problem. It's the community that rises up around that. Instead, just share what you love. If you love your guitar, love your guitar. But understand that other people love other guitars too, and we can all love them. They're awesome, right? But I have found that that there will be a guy with a bunch of really fancy guitars, and he will still also have some inexpensive guitars too, and he likes them all. The guy with a bunch of inexpensive guitars, comparing the just as good as whatever, talks crap about everybody who spends more money than him and how he's smarter than them and whatever. And now he has alienated and cut a section of fun out of his life. Yeah, I hate that for you. Don't do that, man. Don't do that. So, all this stuff is awesome. All guitars are awesome. But just if you are a customer for a particular guitar, shop for that guitar.